Welcome, everyone. Like I said, I'm Lori Sigfridson, and I'm glad to have you here with us this morning. My cohort and colleague from Ottawa and PHE Canada is joining me this morning, Ellen Long, and I'm going to let Ellen introduce herself and give you a little bit of her background, and then we'll get into our discussion this morning about PHE returning to school. And so, Ellen.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us so early. I know it's, start of the workday out there in Nova Scotia. As Lori said, I am joining you from Ottawa. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the traditional Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I am relatively new with physical and health education. I started back in March, and I'm the lead engagement and knowledge mobilization. So basically, I want to get everybody involved with us and tell you all the good things in the world. So I'm thrilled to be here with you and looking forward to this discussion as we go forward.
Thanks, Ellen. And we here in Nova Scotia, we are on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And so as we go through our day, just maybe be mindful of where we are and the lands we're on, and how we show our appreciation for where we are. As I said to Ellen earlier, before everybody signed on, there are definitely some benefits to be living in rural Nova Scotia, and maybe rural Canada in general, with our low numbers of COVID-19. And Ellen was just saying, you know, they're starting to see their numbers go up a little bit. And so one of the benefits for us here in Nova Scotia with our low numbers is that we are going to be able to return to school in September. And we know that it's not going to be business as usual. Things are going to look quite different than how we typically would start our school year off. And as an organization, PHE Canada brought together professionals, physical educators, physical and health educator, academics, as well as community partners to help create a guideline resource for all provinces and ministries regarding physical and health education. One of the things that we saw when the pandemic first hit was that phys ed and health were typically the first two core subjects that were considered to be supplementary versus core. And so we wanted to make sure that in the return to school, that they were seen as more essential courses versus something to be added on. And so it was the creation of our guidelines. And so just to get an idea of who's in the meeting with us this morning, Ellen put up a quick link to Google Forms, just to give us an idea of who you are, where you're from, and what you teach. But maybe, since there's so few of us in here this morning, that we could maybe do a quick self-introduction. And so if you don't mind, if you would prefer to pass, you can just put pass up in the chat line. But would anyone just like to start and just let us know who you are, what levels you teach, and what school region you're in?
I can start. Hi, my name is Rachel Mayette. I teach at Westmount, and I teach grade 6. So I'm teaching grade 6, yeah.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good morning. My name is Beth Graham. I also teach with Rachel at Westmount, and I'll be teaching the 5-6 combined this year.
Great.
I'm Daniel. I'm the principal of the Jilin #1 High School International program. So I'm coming to you from the other side of the world, in China, in Jilin. So I teach high school as well as the principal of the school. So that's me.
Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Erica. I teach in Halifax and I teach high school phys ed, and I also just took on the department head role.
Wow. Welcome, Erica. Good morning. Anyone else that would like to introduce themselves?
Apologies, I was having computer troubles, but my name is Natasha, and I teach in Halifax as well. And this coming year, I'll be teaching grade primary 1 French immersion.
Welcome, Natasha. And so I think what we have here are some classroom teachers as well as physical educator specialists. So welcome. It's nice to have a variety, because what we know and what the research is showing us, although it's limited so far around COVID and the impacts of COVID, is that physical health and well-being needs to be our top priority for our students, our staff, and our support staff coming back to school. That we know that this has been a time of reflection for some, and some have thrived, but it also has been a very traumatic time for some of our students and our staff and our support staff, and perhaps even ourselves, and how we feel about going back to school and how we're going to manage transitioning back. And so just on our first slide here is that, you know, the omission of PHE during emergency learning was really tough for many of us who teach that as a core subject. We know those of us who are kind of in the choir, we know how important it is for our mental, physical, social, emotional health to be active and to be able to apply our learned health-related skills. And so it was really, really challenging for many of us physical and health educators during that time. The confusion around PA versus PE. So what is physical activity versus physical education? And so physical education for us is learning the why behind the movement, as well as the how behind the movement. It's skills-based versus physical activity, which is predominantly just movement-based. And so very, very different. PA is a part of PE, but it is not PE. For many of us who went to online learning or online teaching, it was a steep learning curve. You know, we had a couple of weeks to try to get somewhat up to speed with the current practices with technology and using different forms of communication to our students or with our students and their families. That relational piece that is a part of physical education, but also a part of classroom teaching, that integration or that interaction with students on a daily basis, that experiential learning piece was lost. And so how did we make those learning opportunities meaningful, content-based, but also context-based?
Hi there. Is this the
also, we are looking at the social networks that were lost for students and staff, the inequities within our school system and within our society in general really became quite apparent if they weren't before. And then just the whole stress and anxiety about trying to create a new norm. And what does that look like? And when things were changing on a daily basis, it really was unsettling for many of us. And so those things haven't really gone away. And we have to understand that those things will be coming to school with our students and with their families as we transition back.
So, excuse me, sorry. So when all of this this did start happening back in March, which seems so very long ago at this point, PHE Canada, we're here to support teachers. We're here to support the proper development and implementation of physical and health education programs. So we took a very active stance and developed a number of different resources. So my fingers are crossed that hopefully some of you have come across these already, but if not, we're going to go through fairly quickly, just sort of what's been done to date. Everything that's up is still available and totally accessible in English and French. Everything we do is bilingual, so please do access it, and kindergarten to grade 12. The first portion that we created was a home learning center, and this was a fairly aggressive task for team members with us. There are 141 activities that have been adapted either from programs that already exist within PHE Canada or creating brand new ideas that can be done with little to no equipment or modified equipment, you know, balls of socks and brooms as opposed to hockey pucks and sticks, whatever might be kicking around the house, as well as, you know, 1 to 3 students or children, I think they're referenced in here, but really students as opposed to a full class. So that is still available and definitely still should be accessed, and will be transitioning back to a more active in school role coming up. We also started to do a number of cross-Canada check-ins. We heard from many people across the country that obviously the students were lacking their social connections, but also teachers were really missing out on being able to collaborate and just connect with other professionals. So weekly from mid-April, I think, to the end of June, we started doing cross-Canada check-ins and had just a wonderful success saw wonderful success with that. So again, I hope some of you were able to join us. If not, you can go and see all of the recordings online. But really just a way to get teachers talking to teachers to support each other, whether they felt that they needed to ask specific questions or just be in the same room with like-minded individuals. It was a great way to connect from coast to coast to coast. We also wanted to continue professional development. PHE Canada, unfortunately, like many other organizations, had to cancel our in-person conference, which was scheduled for May. So much heartbreak went into that one, but we wanted to make sure that teachers still had the opportunity to do some professional learning throughout their time, throughout the rest of the year. So we ran a spotlight series. Again, all of these webinars are still available on the website, and I would highly recommend you go and check some out. They cover everything from sexual health and how to teach those sorts of topics, particularly in an online environment, because that can be much more difficult. There's lots of tangible examples of what you can do with low to no equipment, modified activities, inclusion, just a really wide range of topics. I would strongly recommend going to check those out. As I said, they are all available, and we'll be giving you all the links at the end of the presentation. Don't worry. We also really took a strong advocacy role. So we know that as PHE Canada, we obviously value physical and health education, and we know that many teachers across the country do, but as Lori said, when we started to see the at-home learning plans roll out, often it was left out, which is most unfortunate. So we started doing a couple of social media campaigns and really targeting ministers of education, directors of education, people who would be able to make those types of decisions to integrate physical and health education into the at-home learning plans. We also sent letters directly to each of the ministers of education across the country. So really saying, you know, well-being is essential. We must prioritize physical and health education. And we were actually able to see a fair amount of success with that in a number of different provinces. So we will be continuing that advocacy role as we go forward and as people begin to plan for what school is going to look like in the fall. And last but not least, I don't think, as Lori referenced, we did put together a fairly robust document of return to school guidelines. We had lots and lots of interest. We had lots and lots of input into this, but really important to remember that it was just the beginning of a conversation. It's not prescriptive. If you have read it, you'll see that there isn't on day 1, do this. On day 2, do this. We know that every school, every classroom, every teacher, every student is unique and different. So it really focuses on starting the conversation and getting everyone in Canada to start thinking about how physical and health education can and should be delivered in a modified environment. So again, that's available online. Also, if you'd like to access it in Italian by any chance, we had coworkers in Italy reach out. So English, French, and Italian, which is exciting. Over to you.
And so here in Nova Scotia, we just found out last week, what our return to school could look like. And so similar to the PHE Canada return to school guidelines, it was kind of overall guidelines for the province, but it wasn't prescriptive. And so there's still some uncertainty with what school is going to look like in the fall. And like I said before, it's definitely not going to be the same as all our years prior as to how we would set up our classrooms or our gymnasiums and how we would welcome students back. It's definitely going to be different. What the Nova Scotia plan has done is that it's left those kind of detailed pieces up to the regions. So depending on the region you're in, will determine what your schedules are going to look like, how your specialists are going to be scheduled, how lunch and cafeterias are going to be utilized. Everything's going to be left up to the regions, and it's going to be according to the resources that they have available to them, as well as the expertise within that region to support that work. And so what we got last week was kind of an overarching guideline, but we didn't get any kind of specifics. Like Ellen said, nothing's prescribed. So it's not going to say, you know, the first week of school that you do this, this, and this. And so it'll be interesting to see how similar and different the regional plans are going to be. And so, but we do know that we're going to have to modify and adapt what we typically have done to start school off. And so one of the things that, you know, and we do this anyway naturally as educators, but really more so than ever before, we're really going to have to look at creating that safe learning environment for our students, because it's going to be approximately 6 months since we've seen our students, since they've seen us, since they've seen each other. And all that uncertainty, all that fear that they have, you know, an impact of COVID, is all going to come to school with them. You know, once they get on that school bus or once they walk out that door and head to school, that doesn't get left behind. That comes with them. So how do we create a sense of safety, a sense of belonging at school? And I think that's really going to be the majority of our first couple of months in school, is recreating those relationships with our students so that they can see school as that safe place to be once again. That equity piece, if there was ever a time in history where inequities, or in my personal history, in the, you know, almost 50 years that I've been here, that I've seen the inequities so apparent, it has been through this. And so we know that, like I said, it's been traumatizing for some of our students, for some of our families, and some of our communities. And not only are we thinking about the pandemic, but also all the other things that have happened in Nova Scotia. You know, we've had a very traumatic 6 months, and the pandemic is just a part of it. Our mass shooting in April, the accidents with our military personnel, you know, even this past weekend, having an individual within a community that was under surveillance, or you know, so we've had some pretty traumatic, scary experiences in the province. And even though it may not have been directly in our personal communities, it still has impacted us provincially. And so thinking about all those things that have happened and that we're going to need to kind of start to work through when we bring students back into our schools, and the flexibility of it all. You know, many of us, and myself included, like to have that yearly plan that kind of gives me that broad perspective of, you know, what I'm going to do when, and kind of give myself those target dates. Yeah, we have to be flexible with ourselves, and we have to be flexible with our students and meet our students where they are at, and not necessarily get caught up in, I need to be here by this point in time. I think especially the fall is going to be really critical, that we're able to just kind of ebb and flow, not to throw curriculum out the window, but just to know that the pace at which we've been typically able to work at historically will most likely not be the pace that we are able to go now. And be okay with that, and be kind to ourselves around that, and know that that is just a part of us moving through this current climate and situation. And so we've all heard this, we need, students must Maslow before they can bloom. And so when we talk about Maslow, we're talking about his hierarchy of needs, and so we need to make sure that our students have their needs met before they're able to actually find success, academic success or personal success within our system. And so we really need to focus on taking care of each other and taking care of our kids. And that's the starting point of all learning. And we've always kind of had that as our philosophical background, but sometimes we get caught up in the, I need to get these outcomes done, the rush of getting the curriculum delivered sometimes preempts are my students getting their needs met first. And so we need to go back to that. We need to go back to making sure that there's that sense of well-being, that we're doing things within our system, within our classrooms, within our cohorts, that is ensuring a sense of safety, a sense of well-being, a sense of health. Creating that sense of belonging. Like I can't emphasize that enough. And that's not just within our students, our student populations, but within our staffs as well. Coming together and making sure that we're creating a safe space for each other to be able to feel what we need to feel, to be able to support each other in that. So that we're able to support our students that are coming back with the different experiences and learnings that they've had during this time. And having that feeling of acceptance around what they've experienced. And as of late, the past couple of years, we've talked a lot about trauma-informed practices within the province of Nova Scotia and how we deliver our curriculum using a trauma-informed lens. And so understanding that, a big piece of that is understanding that we all have experiences and we all have different experiences or different takeaways from the same experience. And so what I've been able to how I've been able to manage and cope through this time is very different than what my husband may be, or my neighbor, or the students that I have in my classroom. And so understanding that we all have different experiences or different outcomes to similar experiences. And being able to identify or understand that will also help our students. And so, and what does it look like? How do we manage that within our classrooms, knowing that, we have 20 different individuals or 25, and how do we make that space a safe and secure place, an inclusive place for our students. And so one of the approaches that we've been able to implement here in Southwest Nova Scotia, in my region, in TCRCE, is looking at trauma-sensitive approaches and how that helps build resilience within our students and within our school community. And so it all really starts about being relational with our students, being relational with each other. That's one of the things that we know that our students have really missed over this time, is being able to connect personally with their peer group. And so how do we ensure, while in keeping with our public health guidelines around connecting and coming together, how do we foster secure and caring relationships? So what kind of conversations do we have to have? What kind of messaging do we need within our classrooms, within our school communities? How do we support parents who may have concerns around returning to school so that they can support their students. So, you know, those relationship pieces go beyond the classroom. Using a universal approach is really important so that we're able to ensure that all students are getting their needs met and not just a select few. Those social, emotional, and non-cognitive skills, you know, how do we build those? How do we strengthen those? And again, it comes back to creating those spaces for relationships to be able to be nurtured and fostered. How do we communicate and connect? How do we work together as a group, as a community? How do we create that sense of community and sense of caring within our classrooms to help students build their social emotional learning skills? And how do they, to be able to apply those skills as well? And again, you know, creating that safe, respectful, and supportive learning environment, which are all things that we do anyway. I think historically as educators, these are things that we have, we've always done. It's just been a part of how we do business. But sometimes I think we don't give it the intention to, or the attention to the intention. And so putting these things first, really thinking about these things versus going into automatic pilot. And so think about, how am I fostering relationships within my school, within my classes, within, whether it's within the gymnasium or within your classroom? What kind of approach am I taking to make sure that all students are getting their needs met to the very best of my ability? And what resources do I need, or who may I need to reach out to help me or to support me in that? Because there's no way our schools can hold all the expertise needed to meet every need of our students. But what we do have within our school community are those individuals that when we come together, we can do that. And so who are the other people that I need to connect with and work with to ensure that I'm doing the very best I can for my students? What kind of activities, what kind of lessons am I delivering so that students are able to not only learn skills that help with their relational and their behavior modifications or their self-regulation? You know, what kind of activities, what kind of supports, what kind of resources do I have in my classroom to help my students gain those skills and then apply those skills in a safe place? And then, you know, that respectful, supportive environment, so that every student, when they walk through your gymnasium door or your classroom door, it's a place where they feel safe, where they feel they belong, and that they are a part of something that is great. And so those are kind of the approaches, or that's the approach that we've been using here in TCRCE. And I think it's pretty similar across the province, with the emphasis that's been on trauma-sensitive approaches over the past couple of years. And again, the 4 R's, developing those relationships. The relationships come first. Reassuring our students that they are in a safe and secure place. Developing routines, because this has been a time where routines have been severely disrupted, even within ourselves. I know for me, for the first probably 4 to 6 weeks, I found it really hard for me to get settled because my routine was so disrupted. And every day with the new information that was coming in about COVID, it just kind of kept putting me, I felt like I was always off balance. And so I had to do a few things for myself to create a new routine. And so how do we create a routine for our students so that they start to feel that there's some normalcy again? And then that regulation piece, how do we support our students so that they are able to express themselves in a way that gets their needs met, and that they're able to function within the within the classroom or within the gymnasium, again, in a positive way, and that helps them grow and develop. And so if we can keep in mind those 4 R's when we return to school, and again, I think it's something that we naturally do, but really just giving it a little more attention, so that it becomes the rationale behind what we always do. And then there's recess. I don't know if any of you were able to really go through the document that came out last week, but there was one of the things that wasn't in there was recess and talking about recess. And so I reached out to the department and I said, this is a gap that I've noticed. What is our current thoughts around recess? And so the response that I received was that recess will occur. How it occurs, again, it's going to be regionally based. And so, but it is such an important time. It's not just an important time for students to kind of get a brain booster, so get time to move, get time to interact, get time for unstructured play, but it's also a time for them to be able to apply learned skills. So how they communicate with each other, what kind of relationships are they able to further develop? How do they use some of those motor skills or some of their PE skills during that unstructured time? And so it's really important that recess continue. It is still a learning. I always considered it an extension to their learning. So it's that applied, a time for application and not just a free-for-all. Even though it may look unstructured and carefree, they're still applying the skills that we've taught them during that time. And so it's really, really important for recess to continue to occur. And so I would encourage you within your regions, if you have an opportunity, to emphasize that around, this is not something that should be eliminated from our daily programming, that it still needs to happen and it's important, and this is why. And so the PHE curriculum, so health and phys ed, like I said, were somewhat suspended in Nova Scotia when at-home learning took place, or whether it was through the e-learning or the learning packets that were sent home. And so looking at where the gap may be between where we land or where we left off in March to where students are in September. And we know there's a learning gap that occurs anyway, or a regression of learning over the summer months. It just naturally happens. But this has been an extended amount of time for students to be out of school. And so just kind of reframing what we covered last year. Typically, the first couple of weeks of September, we kind of do a review anyway, especially within the PE curriculum. So when you look at the PE curriculum and the health curriculum as well, we have it delivered, or we have it created in chunks of time. So we have P to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and then we have our high school curriculums. And so just looking at that, that age span that you're teaching within. And so we have the same outcomes in those 3-year chunks, but the indicators for success are very different within those years. And so just being able to kind of go back and just kind of do a review of some of the skills, some of the, whether it's health related skills or movement skills, tactical skills within your curriculum, so that you can build from there. You kind of get an assessment, or you do an observation of where your students are at, and then you start building your program from there, or how you're going to deliver your curriculum. We know we are going to need to use alternate environments. That's already been stated, and I think we knew that anyway coming back. For our smaller schools that do not have a gymnasium, they have already had that adaptability piece into their curriculum anyway. If they didn't have a gymnasium, they might have a multi-purpose room, or they may have used the out of doors. They may have used hallways. They may have used empty classrooms. So that will remain the same. Again, this is going to be region by region. Some junior, senior highs would have 2 to 3 classes, up to 60 kids within a gymnasium space. We know that that's no longer going to be able to take place. And so we're going to have to look at what are some of the alternative spaces within our schools that we can use to deliver our curriculum. If you're looking at the P-9 curriculum, this is phys ed specific. If you're looking at that curriculum, we specifically wrote it so you did not need a gymnasium to deliver that curriculum. We wrote the curriculum so that you could be able to use whatever space you had available to you. And so if your gymnasium is going to be redeployed as an alternate learning environment so that social distancing can take place, then think about where are the other spaces within your school to be able to offer your curriculum. Also be thinking about that around if you did have 60 plus students in your gymnasium, and we know that that's no longer going to be able to take place, so that those classes are going to be split up, so that one class maybe uses the gymnasium, well, where do you take your other class? And so just starting to be thinking about what are some other alternative spaces that we can use to deliver our curriculum. We are creative people as educators, you know, as physical educators. We lose our gymnasium to Christmas concerts, spring flings, fall fairs, book fairs. And so it's not unheard of for us to be looking at a different space to deliver our curriculum for, you know, X, Y, and Z. So we just need to be able to be continually thinking about how can I be creative so that my students still want to be engaged, even though we're not in the formal setting of where PE typically occurs. And so I just wanted to throw up a couple of examples here. And again, it's just looking at, you know, what we need to do within our first couple of weeks, within our first month or two of school. And it's really around creating those safe environments, creating those routines, creating, recreating a space for, or creating a space for those relationships to flourish. And for us as educators to be able to kind of go back to see where our students left off so that we're able to kind of pick up from there. And so I just kind of put in one of the grade 5 outcomes. Actually, it's a grade 4, 5, 6 outcome. Learners will apply decision-making skills to fundamental movement skills and movement concepts during different types of physical activities. So really what that is that they're being able to look at different strategies and different ways of movement, problem-solving skills, communication skills, to participate in different kinds of physical activity and situations. And so I gave capture the flag. Students love capture the flag. And so just in grade 4, they needed to learn to demonstrate offensive and defensive strategies and tactics. And in grade 5, we're asking them to apply those tactics and strategies. And in grade 6, we're asking them to analyze them. So in grade 4, they learn to demonstrate them. In grade 5, they learn to apply. And then in grade 6, we want them to analyze. And so if you're teaching grade 5, before they can apply them, they have to know what they are and how to demonstrate them. And so you would go back to see if they have those skills first before you would have the expectation of them applying the skills. And if you're teaching grade 6, you would go back and see if they can apply them before they can analyze them. And so it's just routine. It's typically what we would do anyway. during our fall introduction to our curriculum. Where this could get a little more challenging is if you're an itinerant teacher and you've never had the students before, and you are you're new to the students, they're new to you, and that's where those relationship building lessons and activities really need to come into play first, and then you can build your program from there. And the next example I gave was a grade 10 example. And a grade 10 high school PE, of course, looks very, very different. And so if you're teaching grade 10 PE, there is a huge outdoor component to grade 10 PE. And so all of the activities within all of the 4 different categories within the curriculum, so whether it's outdoor pursuits, exercise science, personal fitness, leadership, all of these can be taught in an alternate space. So if you do not have your gymnasium because of multiple classes or multiple uses of the gym, then grade 10 PE, all of it in its entirety can be taught either out of doors or in an alternative space. And so I think if you look at Fitness Leadership 12, also can be taught in alternative space. Yoga 11 and Dance 11 are also going to have their own guidelines, and they're being worked on right now. And so when you're looking at your curriculum, again, thinking about, if I'm not able to utilize my traditional gymnasium space, where else can this be taught? And the grade 10 curriculum lends itself beautifully to be taught in the out of doors. And so again, if you don't have a strong OE background, so outdoor ed background, who are the people within your community that could perhaps support you in delivering the curriculum? Or are there educators within your school that took the outdoor ed certificate that could also help you deliver this curriculum? And so maybe there's an opportunity for team teaching, or being creative is what we're going to have to be this year more than ever before.
For sure. Thank you for all of that, Lori. So absolutely the key takeaways that we're hoping that everyone here will take away from this presentation is that obviously safety is always, as Lori said, it's not like this is different from any other year. It's always most important, but just paying particular attention to the physical and the emotional safety of students, respecting what they're coming with, what they may be leaving with, and where they're at this present moment. We, as you'll notice, both in our national guidelines and the presentation today, we didn't give very specific instruction on how to sanitize, how to clean. We're not doctors, we are not sanitization specialists, but there's lots and lots of opportunities out there for learning how to do that properly. Obviously, public health in both Canada and Nova Scotia, all other provinces and territories have those guidelines out there. But we do want you to remember that it is possible. We have some examples that we'll be sharing over the course of the next month of different places across Canada, different schools who were able to create, sanitization stations and how they dealt with equipment and all of those sorts of hands-on examples that we will be sharing. But just make sure that that's front of mind always, whether that's making sure everyone's cleaning their hands before they walk into your class and as they leave, or throughout the experience, whatever it may be, but just obviously keeping that front of mind. Masks, of course, is a big question mark and a big a topic of discussion lately. As public health recommends, we would also agree with wearing masks whenever social distancing is not possible. However, we would strongly recommend that as physical and health education teachers, you select activities that can enable social distancing. We don't want to put anyone in a situation where they might have very high exertion cardiovascular activities while wearing a mask. We know that there's been some stories about how that can be detrimental. So certainly just being really cognizant of how you can plan activities, what spaces you have, and how you can modify activities specifically to ensure that if masks are required, then they are fitting for the activity that's being completed by the students. And then, of course, just be age appropriate with the conversations. Again, feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. This is something you do anyway. You're not going to talk you're not going to have the same type of conversation with a grade 12 class as you are with a kindergarten class, but just making sure that when talking about, health and safety standards and practices and routines, that you are starting the conversation and making it part of your normal everyday life and everyday classroom experience for students. So from us, what can we do to help you as you go back to school? I'm sure hopefully you've been able to take some time off in July, but as July is nearing to the end, I'm sure you're starting to think about actually going back to school in the fall. So PHE Canada, we are, as I said, we're here to support you. We're here to do whatever you need to feel that you're prepared to develop and deliver quality physical and health education to your students. So starting, I want to say August 10th is the launch date for all of this, but don't necessarily quote me on that exactly. So beginning to middle of August, we are going to have 80 new activities that are going to be added to that PHE at-home learning center. It will have a new name, but everything will still be there. So that's going to really focus on alternate ways of teaching phys ed that should be there in the fall. So things like how to teach phys ed in a flipped classroom model, how to do it in different environments, what to do if everybody in your school has a personal phys ed kit, what if nobody has equipment whatsoever and you've been told not to, kind of trying to cover all of those bases. So those will be released in a rolling fashion over the course of August. We are also starting definitely on August 10th for this one, releasing bi-weekly. So every Monday and Thursday from August 10th to August 31st, we'll be releasing different, it was supposed to be a 1-pager, but they're turning into like 3 to 5 pagers for each of these topics to just, again, help that everyone has as much information as they need and could want for the fall. So we're going to be reading over all of the national sport organizations, the provincial sport organization guidelines, and pulling out their guidelines and their recommendations for each of their sports. So if you are hoping to play volleyball, what does Volleyball Canada have to say? We're going to do the work for you, so you don't have to read all of those documents. There's a lot of them. What to do if you are a generalist teacher and you've never taught phys ed before, and all of a sudden you're starting in the fall in this new environment. How can we support you? How can you support the well-being of students? All of those topics that are there, we're really going to be releasing them. So absolutely would love any questions or comments or concerns you have about those or anything that's not covered on that list. Please don't be shy to let us know. The Cross Canada check-ins that we ran in the spring were such a success that we will be starting them again at the end of August. Lori is going to be moderating our first one on August 20th, which is exciting. And then we're going to determine at that point if we can continue to run them throughout the school year. Obviously, we did have the luxury of everybody being at home and having more flexible schedules in the spring. So come the fall, when everyone is back in school, we'll have to figure out how to reach a national audience, but we'll figure that out. Don't worry. And then, of course, always our social media conversations, we're posting links to our resources, to other organizations who are doing phenomenal work across the country. So Twitter is our best bet. If you are not following us on Twitter, I highly recommend you do. We also do have a Facebook group, but it's certainly, if you're going to pick one of the two, I would pick Twitter. I would obviously hope you pick both, but at least pick Twitter. And then if you ever have any questions about anything physical and health education related, whether it's specifically for the fall and what that's going to look like, or just in general, please never be shy to email us. That's kind of the general account. And then both Lori and my email addresses are on the last slide. So please feel free to reach out directly to either one of us, or just if you forget who we are, info@PHE Canada. We'll get that over to you. And so I think we have 9 minutes left. And so now we'll flip it over to everybody there. And just if you have any questions you want to share, you can certainly type in the chat, or as we said earlier, we're a pretty small group here. So just unmute yourself and join the conversation. For sure. So we have a question there in the chat about equipment sharing. Certainly a big topic of concern. We know that phys ed has a ton of equipment for different activities. We've seen a number of different examples, as I said, across the country. One that we saw in particular that worked quite well was in Squamish, BC, and that is basically having different sanitization stations. So I'm in the process of getting exactly what those stations were, whether it was, dipping the ball in a, obviously not, anyways, dipping something in a cleaning solution, or if it's a spray bottle, whatever it may be, but essentially just getting children used to the idea of they come into the gymnasium, they take something from the sanitized pile, they play with it, and then either they are responsible for it or the teachers are responsible for it, depending on the age. A lot of that will depend on age of students and staff availability, all of those sorts of things. And I know, Laura, you had a good comment the other day about how teachers used to plan, or it used to be the case that you would plan that you would hopefully do, you know, the same type of activity all day long with your different classes, so you didn't have to set up and take down. Whereas now it might be the case, since we know that it's like a 24-hour incubation period or something like that on the equipment, that perhaps instead of doing basketball all day long, you would do basketball for first period and then soccer for second period and then volleyball for third period, or whatever it may be. So a little bit more setup and takedown and time in between, but enabling different classes to do different skills with different equipment, so there isn't that cross-contamination.
Yeah, and a couple of things that we talked about too is that, especially kind of in the beginning, until we kind of get a routine or we kind of get a better lay of the land within our schools, is that look at the curriculum and pull out pieces of the curriculum that use low to no equipment. And so, it could be personal fitness pieces. It could be some of your dance ed. It could be some of your outdoor ed pieces. So what are some of the pieces of your curriculum that, if you did have to use equipment, that it would be equipment that could easily be sanitized if you had to use it, or equipment that you could assign to specific students, and that would be their piece of equipment that they would only use during that time period. So we'd have to figure out a way to maybe label equipment or find string bags or something. One of the ideas that we had tossed around, and it would mean that schools would have to really be, we really have to be flexible in what we're delivering. So like Ellen said, that if we have grades 4, 5, and 6, and we might be working on some sort of skill development. So let's say it's sending and receiving, then maybe with grade 4, we're sending and receiving with a soccer ball. In grade 5, we're sending and receiving maybe using our hockey sticks and hockey balls, and maybe with grade 6, we're doing basketball. And so that cohort of students would only be using that equipment for the X number of days that you would be going over sending and receiving. No matter which way we slice it, if we're going to be using equipment, we've got to figure out a way to sanitize it. And so that's when Ellen had mentioned that at PHE Canada, we're going to look at BC and Quebec particularly, because they're the ones that went back to school in June. So going to be able to look at what are some of the practices that they used so that they were able to utilize equipment within their PE program, because we know that for a certain part of our program, we can do low to no equipment. But we do have pieces of our program where equipment is required. And so we need to kind of figure out that. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be working on that at PHE, and that'll be shared with everybody. Our Twitter handle, I have my braces in, so I can't talk well, is at PHE Canada. And I would really encourage you, if you are a classroom teacher looking to incorporate movement into your classroom during the day, so if it, over and above PE, check out the at-home learning center. Those lessons were developed for parents and generalist teachers, as well as physical educators. So physical educators would be able to look at those and scale them up to their skill level or their knowledge level. But they were really well developed so that if you became the parent educator during at-home learning, or if you were a generalist teacher, you'd be able to look at that and modify it for your environment. So for your home, for your classroom. And they have everything in there from physical education, physical activity, movement pieces to health education, healthy eating, social emotional learning. So take a look at those and utilize them. It's the At Home Learning Center on the PHE Canada site.
And I just popped a link in the chat there.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Ellen. So Natasha. Oh, excellent. And so Natasha, how did it go? The activities that you used? So Natasha just wrote that she used some of the field day games.
Do you mind if I just talk instead of typing?
No, that's perfect.
Okay, just a little bit easier. It went really well. The kids loved it. I chose a few. Obviously didn't do them all, and I was trying to think about materials that were easy for them to round up, and just with preparation and stuff. But they did. I was trying to think of which one. They did the one where they had to try to race with the oversized clothing on. So that was really kind of funny to see some of them, and the clothes were dropping as did, and some of them really got into it, and it was just hilarious. I wish I could have taken like a picture of all of them because it was hilarious. And some of the objects, another one we did with like the relay of you had to take one object from one and put it in the cup or something. I can't remember exactly. And the one that they really liked, and because at the end I was just really curious and wanted to see them do the activities. But at the end, I let them choose one of the games for me to do. And they chose the one where you had to have the ball of socks or something in between your knees and waddle to one end and then go to the next. So that was kind of funny, and put it in the bowl in the cup. So yeah, that caused a lot of laughter. And when I did those, I wasn't really sure like timing or anything. And what I ended up deciding to do was I played a song for a minute. And the most that they can, back and forth they could do within that minute was kind of what they got. So they just kind of challenged themselves, and we tried to do each kind of relay race or whatever more than once so that they could try to achieve more. But yeah, it was really great. And students some were watching, but most of them were participating. Yeah, it made for just something different that we hadn't really tried in previous Google Meets.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have kind of any burning questions that we might be able to problem solve as a group? Or Ellen and I thought we might make a Google file to share, so that if anybody had any ideas of how to do something, or if they had a question that maybe we could all kind of problem solve together and just have a resource, and a learning resource. But we're here for you. So whatever you need, we want to help with. We're all good?
Hearing none. Yeah, I might suggest that since it is 9:01, I'm sure everyone has other group or presentations they want to go see, but those are email addresses on the screen, so please don't be shy. If you do have a question that pops up at any point, through the rest of your life, let us know, and we will make sure that you are aware of all the new resources that are coming out and what we can do to support you.
And and reach out, please. I'm here in Nova Scotia. I'd love to help any way I can, and whatever you need, we'll figure this out together, because none of us have been through this before, and so anything we can do, we'll figure it out. We can.